What's going on, YouTube Metal Complex here, and welcome back to my Saturday series, The Quest for the Perfect Budget Knife. If you are new to my channel or you're new to this series or both, on Saturdays I do a series called Quest for the Perfect Budget Knife where I go over different aspects of my ideal folding knife if I were, from a manufacturing perspective and trying to cater to as many different people as possible. I also like to do daily uploads, knife reviews, knife overviews. I like to do unboxings, discussion topics, and on Sundays I've got a series called The Knife Guy. If you like daily knife content, this might be the channel for you, so go ahead and hit subscribe and make sure your notifications are set to all because there's definitely more coming, and I like to do giveaways. Speaking of giveaways, I'm currently at 65 patrons, only 5 away from my goal of 70 patrons. At 70 patrons, I'll be doing a free-to-enter giveaway for this beautiful Lion Steel ROK in M390 and red aluminum. It is an integral, very, very cool knife, brand new, completely unused. Once I hit 70, it'll be a giveaway for everybody, not just patrons, not just subscribers, literally everybody. So if you'd like to help support me and at the same time help me reach that goal, follow the link in the description to my Patreon. You can have a look around and then you can join any tier. It counts. If not, that's completely fine. You can just keep watching. Go ahead and subscribe. Make sure notifications are set to all like I said. And you can just be a part of the giveaway anyway when the time comes. I've got a whole bunch of different budget knives laid out here. These knives were provided, lent to me by an amazing knife channel. A lot of you guys are familiar with them. They're called Neves Knives. I'll also link their channel in the description. They sent these to me to help out with this series and kind of, help give examples of things while I talk about what I ideally look for. They're awesome, Jared and Kara. If you're not subscribed, like I said, go over there and subscribe. You can literally pause my video, head over there, subscribe, and then come back. I promise I'll still be here. But anyways, thanks guys so much. I really appreciate that. So here's the episode list if everybody, or if anybody has missed any of them. We've already done 1, 2, and 3. Today we are on Loctite. So if you want to go back and watch some of the other ones, I would suggest you do that. That way you can get clarification on how I arrived at this point. There are specific things in each one of those. Goes all the way down to episode 10, which is price. A lot of people keep saying, you can't have price list. We haven't talked about price yet. If there's a topic on the list that's below 4, I haven't talked about it yet. So rest assured, we will be talking about it. I'm going to go over a bunch of different lock types that you find on budget knives. I also have a few examples out on the table that are not exactly budget knives. So a lot of you who are new to this might be asking, how are you defining budget knife? Budget knife is different. The price range is different for every single person. So no matter what I say, I'm going to have people arguing with me. Rest assured that episode 10 will include my thoughts on price, and the range that I'm speaking in is no way indicative of, it's not 100% indicative of how I actually feel about where the price should be. But for the sake of, talking about all the different aspects from a manufacturing standpoint, what it would cost to manufacture this, to keep my options open, I consider anything, for the sake of this series, anything under $100 to be budget. Again, before you get up in arms, episode 10 is price, so hold your questions or your thoughts until the price, if they have to do with price. So I'm going to go over these different lock types. We're going to talk about them, why I might or might not want them on my ideal budget knife. But keep in mind, I don't have any lock types out here that I consider to be bad. I think all of them are good. So this series is not meant to bend you to think exactly the way I do. It's really more so just to give you my thoughts and explain my line of thinking, how I, the things that I consider, and then you can take that and apply it to what you consider to be ideal. We're going to start off here with, I guess what you would call this on the Kershaw, well, one of these is the bare knuckle and one of these is the knockout. I believe this is the knockout, this is the bare knuckle. By the way, not going to get hung up on the names of knives. If you're interested in any of these knives, down in the description, again, will be links to each one of these. They'll all be my Amazon affiliate links, so you can purchase one or multiple of these knives. This is a sub frame lock on an aluminum frame. I think this is a really, really good lock type. It's close to what I would look for. It's easy to engage and disengage. I think it's going to be reliable. It can be mixed with frames like aluminum or combination steel and G10 or cartridge linered steel and G10. And it serves as a good, strong locking system while at the same time keeping the weight down low. I think this is good. I don't think that it would be ideal for me and ideal for everyone. And here's why. I mean, and now we're gonna go all over the place with lock type here, but number one, because it serves either right or left-handed people, I mean, it's not an ambidextrous lock. So, and remember, the idea here is to hypothetically create a folding knife, once we conclude this series, that would serve as many people as possible for as many different things as possible. I'm not trying to specifically create a budget gentleman's folder or specifically create an ultimate hard use folder. I'm simply trying to create, hypothetically, a folding knife that would serve all of my needs and as many different people's needs as possible. Starting off with a lock that is not ambidextrous, I don't think is 100% the way to go, but keep your minds open, because it may be that a locking system that just needs to be created for right and left-handed people is the answer. We're going to kind of talk about it. Same thing here on the bare knuckle. I really like this one because it's not assisted. That's really cool. I can't wait to talk about this one in a review. I like this setup though, because the idea, especially with like some of these USA ones, they don't need to replace the entire frame, right? It's kind of like the lock bar insert idea. They would just need to create or replace that cutout part that sort of screws into on the inside of the aluminum frame there. It's a good idea. I think it's a fairly expensive part to machine. I'm trying to keep the cost down as much as possible. I don't know 100% that it would be ideal. What about a frame lock? This is one of the most impressive budget knives I've ever seen. It's a Tucson, I forget the model, but really amazing. I mean, a frame lock's awesome. I think it's actually the lock type that I chose. It is the lock type I chose for my ideal folding knife, which is an entirely separate series, one that does not consider price. The frame lock is definitely a great locking system. It's a locking system a lot of people are used to now, since frame locks, flipper frame locks, have kind of dominated this market. This one's got a steel lock bar insert, which is an even better setup than this. On a budget knife, a frame lock is probably going to have to, I mean, like, I know Tucson's making some that are titanium and that are on bearings, and they're in a pretty good place. I think it'd be a pretty good setup. I mean, like, if I could be assured that a knife could be, under like the $75 price point, and it was a titanium frame lock, and it had a steel lock bar insert, and at the same time, the warranty would allow me to get the parts that I needed to replace that lock bar if it were to fail, or if I lost a screw or something like that, then yeah, absolutely. But again, you've got probably a higher manufacturing cost for titanium, additional manufacturing costs for there being a steel lock bar insert, which is something people would want. So then some people would say, well, why don't we just do a steel frame lock, because then the face is steel anyway. Well, then you don't have the ability to change out the lock face, which is not really that big of a deal, but you have steel instead of titanium, which weighs more, and that's not going to be ideal for every single person. So a frame lock, it might work, it might be a little bit complicated. This is an example of an all steel frame lock on a super budget knife from Kershaw that I think works okay, and it's fairly lightweight. Do I think it's ideal? No, I don't. I just don't. Truthfully, I just don't know that I think a frame lock is going to be ideal. Moving on, here we have the simple classic liner lock. You guys know that I base this series off of what I consider to be one of the most excellent budget designs out there, which is the Ontario Rat 1 and Rat 2 models. They're simple liner lock knives. I've really beaten on this knife, and it has not failed. It's got good lockup geometry. It hasn't, I mean, this thing hasn't worn over very much. I've had this pretty much the entire time I've had the channel, and it's been right about 50%. Completely solid. Another example in this Kaiser simple liner lock. Easy to engage and disengage. On a simple liner, whether it's nested or not. Do I have an example of a nested liner lock? This is one that's kind of underneath. It's almost like a frame lock underneath overlays. I kind of like that, because then you get the additional strength, or the additional surface contact. A little bit thicker than the liners on this guy. More surface contact. Underneath an overlay, in this case, some kind of almost like rubberized overlays on this this other Kershaw budget knife that are slightly contoured. I really, really like this setup. I think this is really, really nice. We've already talked about my ideal deployment mechanism. That wouldn't be it, but I like liner locks. They're simple from a manufacturing standpoint. They should keep the cost down. They can be done either cartridge style or sort of countersunk into the frame underneath scales or overlays or or whatever. There's a lot of different things you can do, you know, and there's so many different examples. And on top of that, you know, some of these have like additional locking systems, and I wanted to talk about that. Do I think an additional locking system is necessary? It's neat, but I don't know. With this, like this, I know we're kind of jumping off topic, but with this kind of being where I put my hands, I'm not 100% certain I wouldn't accidentally disengage it when I needed it to be engaged. And I also don't know what I'd be doing with my knife where I would really need an additional lock on there. But yeah, I like liner locks. And you're like, you know, I'm sure a lot of you are like, what? But you said, you know, it's locks that aren't ambidextrous may not be the right choice. They may not be, you know, but if you had to, if from a manufacturing standpoint, they had to get with a set and go, okay, we want to cater to the 10 to 15% of people who are left-handed, and we're going to have to make, you know, a right-handed version of this knife and a left-handed version. The least expensive lock type for that, if you're going to go that route, would be a liner lock. As far as all other ambidextrous lock types I've ever seen, besides back locks or butt locks or whatever you call it, you know, like the triad lock, this is the least expensive ambidextrous lock type, right? But you don't have the ease of deployment factor. Not as much. You still, I mean, engaging it might be fairly easy, but disengaging it requires more than one movement. With a liner lock, you have one-handed, absolutely one-handed manipulation with basically one movement to close and open it. So I'm balancing, like, do I want to cater it, you know, and make it a completely ambidextrous lock type and sacrifice some of the ability to easily manipulate it? And a lot of you are like, it's so easy to manipulate a lockback. Like, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the example I always use. This is such a rambly episode. Coming out of the pocket, deploy it, use it, and then put it away with as little brain capacity as possible. I don't want to have to think about my tools, or I don't want to have to take the attention away from what I'm doing up on that ladder or up on scaffolding, some area where my footing is, I don't have the best balance or the best footing. I don't want to have to take focus away from that while I quickly use this tool that's meant as a catalyst of convenience. I want to make that cut, and I want to get it put away and back in my pocket as conveniently and safely as possible. So extra little movements like what it takes to close a lockback, push it in, get it to here, reposition my hands, then close it again, right? A liner lock's easier. It's easier to do that. Same for the same reason I don't know that I want any extra, you know, technically, in my opinion, unnecessary durability in the lock or an additional lock. Kind of same thing with this. I love this CRKT Razzle. Super cool, but I don't know that I need this up here. It's more convenient, and it's definitely out of the way, right? If I was gonna have a knife that had this extra little thing up here, it'd be something like this. But I don't know that I need it, you know? And I risk, you know, accidentally disengaging it when I go up here to you know, bear down on the spine of it, on the jimping. So I'd almost rather it not be there. It is definitely an extra cost that would be considered when manufacturing it. No, it's not a sub. So this is an example of a sub liner lock that's nested into the frame. Great setup, because you nest those liners in there. Obviously, I don't know that, I think we've already talked about, I wouldn't prefer carbon fiber. I'd prefer G10 for you know, cost of manufacturing reasons. But a nested liner lock is a good idea. It's gonna save you the weight of whatever material you're removing to set those liners into the scales. And you still have arguably the exact same amount of strength and surface contact with that liner. Sorry, the camera's having a really hard time focusing today. I'm not sure what's going on. That's a great setup. Should be easy to access either way. Another example of a good liner lock, you know, one that's not nested there, but still has thicker liners, good surface contact. I can't remember what this is called. The terrestrial? Yeah, terrestrial. So liner locks are great. Now, with the patent having officially ended on the Axis lock, you know, Gonzo, you know, they might still kind of need to be careful about exactly how much of a design they borrow from another maker. But in terms of what they're doing with this lock type, now there's nothing wrong with it. The Axis lock is fantastic for deployment, for disengagement. Awesome, awesome lock. Completely ambidextrous too, and very strong. What's the problem with it? The problem with it is that it utilizes those omega springs. And while not a lot of cases have occurred where the omega springs break, enough of that has occurred to where it is, you know, it's definitely something you have to consider. The omega spring breaks, and this budget knife, right? Let's say, I mean, it's likely this thing is not made in the United States. We're going to talk about that because Kershaw has an awesome U.S. budget line. But it might be a little bit difficult. Then you have to go to the aftermarket. A lot of people say, oh, you can get these omega springs or whatever they are. Some people call them wolf springs, or is that what Hogue uses? I don't know. You can get on the aftermarket and get that stuff. Okay, that's fine. For those of us who know, you know, exactly how to do that and are not, you know, we're well versed in taking our knives apart and we're confident with that. But that's not all of us. Most of us just want a tool that's going to function, and it doesn't have all these extra parts we have to worry about breaking. And most people don't want to mess with that. You don't have to mess with that with a liner lock. So the Axis lock definitely, I would say, arguably has more strength than a liner lock. Is definitely more versatile. Definitely, you know, it's going to be, you know, better suited for a wider range of people, given that it is ambidextrous. But it has the fatal flaw in that it has a part that can fail and create a massive inconvenience for people. So unless they change this to the setup that they've got on the Anthem, where it's more of a peg with a spring, I don't know that I want something like that. How about a button lock? These are popular. This is a model, I forget the name of this model, that's actually got a secondary lock back there. Button lock's okay. I think of everything I've got on the, excuse me, I think of everything that I've got on the table, the button lock is probably the weakest setup, or plunge lock or whatever. Definitely fidget friendly, absolutely, and probably strong enough, but I don't think it's quite as strong or reliable as a liner lock. And if we're designing a knife that's going to cater to the vast majority of people, I want it doesn't need to be the strongest lock in the world. It doesn't need to be a triad lock, right? Because we're not all jumping out of helicopters and doing whatever, you know, using knives as a diving board or stepping stones, you know, like jamming our knives into the side of a mountain and then having to climb up it. I'm joking around, but I've always said that the triad lock's awesome, but I think it's overkill for the vast majority of us. Again, I don't think they're going to need more strength than they, you know, would get from a liner lock, and I don't think, you know, the extra movements that I have to go through to disengage a triad lock and put it back in my pocket is something that I really want to deal with just for the convenience of it being ambidextrous. Again, I am just a right-handed person, so, you know, that trade-off for me is not as good. But I am still trying to cater to a lot of people. What about something like this crazy thing? I'm not convinced that is safe. To disengage this, two hands up on a ladder won't work. Probably plenty strong, just won't work. Sorry. Compression lock would be nice, but again, that's pretty much Spyderco, and you're not going to get that. I think what's the least expensive compression lock out there? It's still like 80 bucks, isn't it? Compression lock is great. Again, not ambidextrous. About the same as a liner lock. It's almost inevitably going to cost more than a liner lock. Might be a little bit stronger, but it's almost inevitably going to cost more. Like I said, a system where, now the problem with the Manix 2 initially is that, it's an awesome lock, but it utilizes a plastic cage. Thankfully, Flytanium came out with a titanium cage that solves the problem with the need for like an Omega spring, because it's just a coil spring that wraps around a peg. Very durable, very reliable, seems to be pretty resistant to dirt and debris, completely ambidextrous. Great system, right? Nobody has invented that in steel. And at the same time, it's also got enough components to it that it's probably going to be kind of costly. So if I were to, hypothetically come up with a lock that would be ideal for a budget knife, honestly, it would be like this exact ambidextrous titanium cage that's on the Manix 2, but that's expensive. Even made out of steel, that'd be expensive, and nobody has done that. Even better, the lock that they've got on the Anthem. Oh my gosh, Benchmade. That lock on the Anthem is awesome. But, what are the hopes that we could get that on a budget knife? It's going to take a little bit. I imagine at some point somebody will invent something. It's something that the budget knife world sorely needs. And the first company to do it will knock it out of the park. If they're getting if they combine it with a flipper tab, I don't know how that would work. Probably not. You'd probably have to do a thumb hole or a thumb stud. But the very first, high strength, all steel, fully ambidextrous lock that doesn't have the the drawback of Omega springs and utilizes something like a peg and a coil spring around the peg, oh my gosh, you will sell so many of those because you have that system that sort of pushes a bar, or in this case a ball bearing, up against the tang of the blade. Very, very strong, easy to manipulate with one hand, both in terms of deployment and putting it away. Easy. Neither one of those locking systems are, but again, we don't have that. So would it be ideal? Yes. I mean, truthfully, for the sake of like just making sure you understand what I would consider to be ideal, it's this hypothetical fantasy lock that does not exist yet. So what am I left to conclude? Oh, by the way, I have one more example of a locking system, and that is not a locking system. Somebody asked me, why don't you have any slip joints up there? I love slip joints, guys, but plain and simple, slip joints are not going to cater to the vast majority of people. Why? Because they don't lock. I know you may disagree with me, and that's fine. You don't have to agree with me, but my ideal budget knife locks, so slip joints are just out. Awesome knives. I carry that Victorinox Cadet often, but it's not well suited for the majority of things that I might ask of my knife on a day-to-day basis. So what am I left to conclude with what's at the disposal? At our disposal, hypothetically, from a manufacturing standpoint? Well, we want something that's easy to access, that's not foreign to manipulate, that's easy in terms of cost, and that syncs up with all of the other things that we've talked about on past episodes, right? Mainly talking about deployment, episode 2 and 3 deployment, and handle materials and hardware. Truthfully, I think the one that's going to do it, and this is going to be a really boring answer, guys, but I think it's the simple liner lock. A liner lock is strong enough. A liner lock has, generally, when they're done right, and I mean, and we'll go over this on episode 9, the little details, but the little cutouts that are made for ease of access on a liner lock, yeah, easy to access, works well in unison with both thumb studs and flippers and thumb holes and all that stuff. I've already talked about what I consider to be ideal for deployment, but a liner lock's going to be inexpensive. It's going to have steel-on-steel contact. If the geometry's done right, it's going to lock up solid. Again, using the Rad as an example, I've really beat on this thing, and I throw it around, and it's totally fine. It's wearing in nicely. There's no excess wear or anything. Your mileage may vary. It should be fairly inexpensive to remedy in a warranty situation. Now, I don't expect this hypothetical budget knife to have a lifetime warranty. Something we'll talk about in price is, when it comes down to it, would it be easier to just replace the entire knife? Ideally, I would want the lifespan of this knife to be about 10 years. And after 10 years, if the knife died or just broke, I'd be like, okay, that's kind of the idea of a budget knife, right? You don't expect it to last forever. I mean, if you expect your budget knife to last forever, you're kidding yourself. I mean, that's why they don't have lifetime warranties. They're just not going to, right? But if it's inexpensive enough and it's made well enough and you get 10 years of good hard use out of it and it dies, yeah, I'm happy with that. I think a liner lock would serve very, very well. Everybody knows how to manipulate a liner lock. The liner itself adds good durability to the entire frame of the knife. If it's set up in a way that it's not countersunk, it makes aftermarket scales easier to be produced, which is beneficial for us, the people who want to customize and make the things our own, or the company who's actually creating the knife. It's easier for them to manufacture the scales. A lot of people argue with me and they said, I don't think it's that much harder to mill out a frame. It is an extra step, though. I mean, and we're talking about like minimizing the manufacturing, the overall time and labor and costs, right? And that comes down to even wear on tools. So eliminating steps, it helps out with that. Liners can be milled, which means you get the strength of the liner and you get the weight reduction benefits. So all of those pieces kind of fit together. The only downfall, the only bad part with a liner lock is that they're either going to serve right or left-handed people. And that's a drawback. I came down and I was like, what do I say? Like, at the end of this video, do I say the best lock that exists is one that we just don't see on budget knives other than the Axis lock on the Gonzos? Well, then I started thinking about it. Would people rather have a lock that they know they don't have to deal with Omega springs failing? Or would they rather have just the ability to, you know, be left-handed and actually have a left-handed operating knife? It's going to be different for every single person. But I'll tell you, if I was trying to manufacture a line of budget knives, this is the route that I would take would be, I would make a liner lock. And if the line got big enough and popular enough, and then I could put enough money into the line to manufacture 10 to 15% of the overall inventory as left-handed liner locks, then I would do that, you know? It takes a lot, though. You know, that's why you don't see it often. You only see it with big manufacturing, like you see that with Wii sometimes, and I don't know, does Bestech do it sometimes? I don't know. You know, it can be done, but you know, I want left-handed people to be involved in this. A lot of times you get a knife like this it's milled out for right or left-handed carry, tip up or tip down, and then for left-handed people, you know, on the Rat, it's a pretty good setup. I'm not left-handed, and I can completely operate this knife with my left hand, and I've had to before. I've had to in my yard understand, you know, exactly where to put my hands on the left-handed side, and then teach myself to operate a liner lock with the left hand. I think it's a little bit more dangerous because you do have to sort of turn the knife, disengage it, and get more of your thumb in the path before you move it out of the way. With my right hand, you know, not nearly as much. It's only the tip of my thumb that's in the path. It's a little bit more dangerous. So, unfortunately, what I'm saying is it'd have to be a liner lock. Sorry, lefties, you can still work with it, but for a while, unless the line got really, really popular. And this is all like a big, crazy fantasy. I don't make knives. I wouldn't know how to, you know, like engineer that or put something together. I've never run like a big knife plant, or I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who's just like guessing on a whole bunch of stuff. So I could be wrong about so much, but my basic instinct with all this is to make things as simple as possible and at the same time as durable as possible. And, you know, that caters to the widest variety of people using their knives for the widest variety of tasks. Funny enough, the conclusion I'm coming to with a lot of this is it kind of boils down to some pretty simple stuff, some pretty boilerplate stuff, you know? Simple setups, nothing complicated. Oftentimes, overcomplication can take interesting forms, but is it necessary? No, not really. You know, that's kind of what I'm finding. But your opinions on this stuff might be different than mine, and that's the beauty of this, is you can completely ignore what I'm saying here. This series is mainly just meant for your entertainment and just to kind of get everybody's cogs turning. You know, I'm not the end-all be-all on this stuff, and I love reading your guys' comments and what you consider to be your favorite or ideal budget models and ideal you know, hardware setups or scale materials, you know, lock types. I like to hear all of that. You know, I have my own thoughts, but you don't have to think like me. Okay, this was a super lengthy episode. That's going to be pretty much it for today's episode on Loctite. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.